effect of temporary protection visas on people. That was just an absolutely devastating experience.
Well, let me ask you this, because the question that's being raised now is whether this government has actually shifted the problem offshore, effectively outsourced it, so that the same people who were put in detention in Australia are now largely being kept in detention funded by Australia and in detention centres built by Australian dollars in Indonesia.
Well, I'm just going to stick with the health focus here. The key thing is to make sure that mental health and health facilities are available to them. That's the key issue with the offshore issue. Do they have access to proper mental health care and other types of health care in the locations they're being detained?
Do you fear that they may not?
I'm not sure about that. I think there are processes to try to ensure that happens, but I haven't been to the offshore detention centre, so I can't answer it definitely.
OK, let's go to Julie Bishop on this. There's been a fair bit of talk about this recently. In fact, the opposition has pretty much accused the government of shifting the focus of this detention of asylum seekers back to Indonesia and putting the problem in their lap.
Well, our concern is that the government weakened the border protection laws and has essentially said to Indonesia, this is now your responsibility to sort it out. The Prime Minister actually rang President Yudhoyono and asked him to intercept a boat that was heading to Australia and asked him to intervene and take it to Indonesia's shores, and then essentially said to Indonesia, it's your problem. Same with the Oceanic Viking. There is nothing humane about a policy that encourages people to go to people smugglers, puts them aboard leaky boats and sends them across the seas. We know that there were 105 Afghanis who were on a boat last November coming down from the north and haven't been seen since. We don't know how many other situations there are like that. So there's nothing humane about the people smuggling trade. What we need to do is ensure that Australia meets its obligations to be a good humanitarian country, and we do take our share of humanitarian refugees under an organised program, but we must also ensure that the integrity of our borders is such that we don't have people arriving by boat in circumstances which causes death and injury.
Very briefly, the logic of that would be to keep them in the detention centres in Indonesia, which have been outsourced and built by the Australian government.
Well, working with the transit countries and working with the source countries to ensure that they don't get into the hands of the people smugglers.
Tony Bourke.
I think the point that we need to discourage seriously people smuggling is inarguable. There's no argument against that. You have a situation, and Julie's referred to the more recent example. I remember all the discussion following Civex. People drown on the way here, and that's not the way we want people to get here. It's also the case that the solution is not, once people get here, to treat them pretty cruelly and say, oh, there you go, we found a deterrent. And under temporary protection visas, what we said to people was, well, Australia said to people was, even if you're found to be here genuinely, even if you have ticked every box in being a true refugee, we're not going to give you any certainty, possibly ever. And that brought down mental health consequences which weren't in their interests, weren't in Australia's interests, and I really hope the opposition's not serious about wanting to bring them back.
Can I just ask you this, though? How do you know the same things aren't happening in detention centres in Indonesia, where you have no control but simply provide funding?
What they are there in place of is the camps, which, in terms of living conditions, the camps that people have been waiting on, whether it be Lombok or elsewhere, have not been good situations. The fact that Australia is helping Indonesia with the people who are there is a better situation than what was happening prior to our assistance.
Let's hear from Jackie Ninio. I mean, interesting question for you, I think, because are there parallels here with the 1930s and what happened to Jewish people who desperately tried to find third countries to take them, and they simply weren't allowed in any of these places. They were kept in camps. Sometimes they just couldn't get anywhere. They couldn't find a port that would take them.
Absolutely, and I think the telling thing is that, you know, the statistic that 90% of the people who are coming are genuine refugees. There are people escaping and fleeing the most horrendous situations, and we are so blessed and so lucky to be here. And I understand also the need for health checks and for security checks, but really it needs to be done in the most humane way possible for these people who've been through so much already, just to give them a home and a place. And we have enough space, we have enough room, and they're each human beings, and I think that we need to be reaching out to them and to bring them in the best possible way that we can.
Steve Fielding, let's hear from you. I mean, Family First, well, I can remember when you first came to Parliament, Family First had quite a strong position that people were being poorly treated in detention centres. That seems to have evolved, if I may say that.
Yeah, look, it certainly has. And look, Family First realises that our vote is going to be crucial on this issue because it is going to come up in Parliament, I think, probably before the election. I went to Christmas Island this year. The Rudd government was able to get me there, which was good. And I spoke to some of the boat people or asylum seekers fresh off one of the boats. I asked them, did you pay any money? And this is not the driving force here. And they said, yes, about $8,000 and another 20 on the way. Now, I said, well, how many actually make it to Australia? And they, out of 100, about 20 get through. And I thought, blimey, that's a lot of people that people smugglers are playing on people's minds. Some get detained and some are actually killed along the way and some actually die along the way that nobody hears about. Now, this is a real issue. I voted, my record on this is pretty strong, I voted against some of the Howard government changes. I look at this issue seriously. I voted against some of the Howard government issues. My vote was crucial. He withdrew the bill from Parliament, wouldn't even have the guts to bring it into Parliament because I said I wasn't going to vote for it. Now, many people may not know that. Then when the Rudd government got elected, the Rudd government made some changes which I thought were a good move, more humane. I backed those changes. My vote was again crucial on those issues. Now, what I didn't expect was thousands of people to start arriving in Australia. We have a problem, okay? Now, before we start overreacting and saying, what are we going to do, you have to admit we have a problem. First of all, every person that Australia takes that comes through an unauthorised way, we take one less from the front of the queue. These people are waiting. Hold on a second here. When you say there's no queue, there's people waiting for years, for absolute years, and everyone we take by boat, we take one less. And secondly, we are making it even easier for the boat people. Now, I'm proud as an Australian that we should treat people humanely. But I didn't expect the problems of thousands of people coming and actual boats. So we do have to admit that we've got to address this issue. How we need to address it, we have to have a fair income debate without all the decisiveness about it.
All right, I just want to hear from Richard Dawkins. The same debate, essentially, has been going on in the UK, in fact, right across Europe. Your thoughts on hearing it repeated here?
I've been rather moved to hear the very humane statements that have been made. I don't feel I should contribute to this debate. I know nothing about the Australian situation, but I was moved especially by what the Rabbi was saying.
OK, and Patrick McGorry, finally to you. I mean, you seem to be reflecting on the way the conversation is going. I'm just interested on your thoughts.
I think a number of points have come out. Look, it's an upstream problem. You know, it's a massive worldwide problem. When Senator Fielding says, you know, there are large numbers coming, actually in world terms, there are a couple of thousand on Christmas Island. It seems like a lot because there's been an increase. But if you look at it in world terms, Australia itself takes 130,000 people plus into the country every single year. So it hasn't been looked at in a logical way, this issue, because it's been politicised for the last 15 years or so. I just don't think the media, the politicians, the community have really had a logical look at this issue.
I want to just complete this